number of employees the same as it was in 19 that we could have? The number of employees that were authorized by the budget in 19 and the number of employees authorized now, do we know if that's the same or similar? It's the same.
And the routes are the same or less. So my point is, I know we've increased pay. It's
No,
great,
we're also
terrific, and we're gonna do, we should
increased
do
costs
that
on fuel,
forever.
which is coming back down some, but we definitely
100%.
had fuel costs and then.
John knows what it took to run the organization in 2019 and what it takes to run the organization now. And what are those numbers? What was the budget in 2019?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know. I know OpEx in 2018.
Throw a dart, it was like 27 million. 55 million.
So it's up 3 in the last
8,
3 years.
it's up 8. No, it's up 8, 55 to 63, it's up 8.
We were about 49 million in 18 for OpEx.
In 18, 49
So
million.
49 to
40,
56.
yeah, 48, 946.
That was
7.
supported with, is that expense, that's revenue?
That was expenses.
It's expenses. It's supported by what revenue in 2018? Supported by fares,
Fares. and
Federal,
The
state.
purchase service, yeah.
And
And
then
local,
local,
and
and
16 million local.
well, so that's 50 million. And today it's 63. Next year it's gonna be 63-ish.
But 60 this
63. So it's 13 million. 14 million if it was 49. It's 14 million higher.
we're at 64, 485 this
It's a
year.
big deal. So that 14 million is great. And that obviously I would always argue we're going to be putting our people, which we've been doing, put your people, I'll fix the recruiting problem, fix the foundation core, get these shelters, the plan rolling, and let's move on. But 14 million of a $49 million budget is 33%. I think that's 33%. It's 52 million. So it's more, it's 30, 35.
28 to 20 to 30%.
20, 30%. So you have 30% revenue expansion, no route expansion, no staffing expansion.
The revenue did not go up 30%.
Just
What's CBTA money?
Just figured that
But
out.
we lost 16.
We just discussed that. It was 49 million.
What went up is the,
And now it's 63.
TISDAC went up
Yeah.
in this current year operating.
You're
TISDAC
talking about the Fed money went up?
stayed
And that's ongoing money. I don't want to talk about one-time stuff, right?
Not yet.
in. TISDAC
So did our revenue actually go up?
Should be. Oh, yeah.
Should.
Yeah, I mean, well, you also had in there, you had the CARES Act relief money as well as that support.
That's the
what
stuff we
it
want to
messed
take
up.
out. I don't, we don't want to discuss one-time
Well,
stuff.
CARES money, we should have done one-time expenditures with, not.
That's what we try to do baseline.
So what we're trying to get to the point is like, what did CBTA do? Like that is the crux. And then how do we invest? How much of that can we possibly invest in our people to get the foundation of our core of our staffing competency back?
How much does it cost
And
to
work on
go up
projects.
$3 an hour, because across the board, if we were at full staff?
Did you have that, you know how much? No. John, putting it at $3 an hour across the board.
Not off
At
the
full
top of
Probably
my head.
staff,
say
not
you
at
But I'll tell you what the
understaffed.
decent ask there, John, is this. The easy ask is for every dollar. What is it?
Yeah, well, that's true.
Later on, fine. You can't, I mean, you'd be a miracle worker if you had that in your head, but later on, if we were to authorize every dollar, what does it cost? Like, we know that in the county,
How's your staffing doing on your business?
killing it. Hiring as fast as we can put them in training. But we're paying 25% more than the market, the employee. And we treat them well. I mean, our staff gets full-time benefits, I mean, ticket takers. So it's a good job. And it's flexible. They make their own schedule. We don't get, we have, the perks of our job are different. We have 2,400 employees. We've never had more. We're at our peak for employees right now. And I can't keep the application. I can't slow them down. But I mean, we're also working rock, we're working concerts and football games. A little bit of a different job. It's
We don't have to have a CDL for that, but
do
you do
not,
have
it's
to
a
have
lot of
BCJS.
differences. My
Well,
job
you don't
is
have to have
flexible.
BCJS to take tickets.
I'm
but
getting
you
people
do
who
for
drive
security, so.
all day who want an evening park. Like that's the market I'm hiring for. It's different.
I'm trying to find the schedule that we did the $2 impact. So you still got $3 in.
But I'm also not sure that money's not just money. Throwing money at it. It's
Well,
very more
if
money.
there's something else that's broken, throwing money at it doesn't.
Bingo. And I discussed that.
I
with the
try to
recruiter.
tell that to the schools all the time. in Chesterfield. I'm like, so outside of pay, what is the number one reason that teachers are leaving? Oh my God, you would have thought I'd like.
I'm
get
sure
on the
you
sledgehammer.
You just
They were
opened
like-
it up, right?
They were like, I mean, this is the answer. Relocation, their families relocating.
You asked teachers.
Well, no, I was asking the
Because
school
I mean,
administration.
my
Now,
wife's
if I
a
had
teacher, I
teachers,
could
I
give you
could
the
tell you the
reason.
reason, because they're
Yeah.
not getting supported by
Right.
the
Awful.
administration.
It's just awful.
It is
They're,
not money.
It's not money.
Nope, it is
It's
not.
not. Money is what they talk about, but money is not what I mean, I've talked to the teachers that are actually leaving, and they're not leaving because of money. They're leaving because of environment.
Yeah, I did exit interviews for a lot of Richmond teachers over the years.
I mean, it's not comfortable. It's not what you want to hear, but I don't know that that's the problem here at all. I had no idea. I just know that.
So what was your perspective? Money, the schedules?
The schedule, so probably quality of life is probably the real.
Yeah, the confrontational nature of the
And then
kids, 100%.
So,
100%.
so, I mean, that actually, you, dealing with the public and dealing with, whether you're dealing with students that are acting crazy or administration that's not supporting you in the schools, it's still, they at least have quality of life. They don't have
In my
quality
business,
of life.
we get the same thing. It's competition with the public. We're in the security world. Competition with the public, which I can't control. It's a little bit of you can't either. In my business, dollars, you know, that's why we raised our hourly rate. Flexibility of schedule, right? So those things are the same. Those things do not
Yeah,
change.
but your flexibility is
And-
easier than their, than
100%,
GRTC.
100%. And support from the organization. Like you know that because you know me for 20 years. We treat them as much as family as we humanly possibly can. And that's it's
People
like,
really
there's
talk
no,
about that.
there's no secret sauce to this. I had this discussion yesterday with the recruiter that was in here, and we had this exact, there's no secret sauce to it. It's like, treat them as best you can, have the support there. Every employee wants that. But my buddy Dex, the IT guy, wants that. He wants to work for an organization. Yeah, everybody wants that. And who doesn't want that? No matter where you work. I want that in my household, right? So that's no secret
Well, I know
sauce.
you knew that from the beginning, because the very first race you had at the racetrack, I worked for him. And he handed me his credit card and said, take that golf cart and go to CVS and buy all the cases of water you can get.
22 years ago, that day. I remember that day.
He handed me that card and said, take that golf cart, drive up the road and get all the cases of water you can get and bring them back.
We're a little bit more
Because it was
organized now.
hot. Yeah, I know, but that was the first day you ever did it. I mean, I'll never forget that. But from day one, from the very first race you ever
Still do it
flew
today.
over, you were making sure that the people, it was a hot day and you're like, crap, I need to get water in these people. Go get them water.
Still do it today. It makes a difference.
I'm gonna call Lincoln.
Yeah, is somebody want, you get call? See if you stop for coffee, don't
I
bring us
like
something.
to tell people that I worked for you before you knew what the letters DCJS stood for.
That is actually true.
It is absolutely
That
true.
is 100% true.
I was in
We
your-
found out with
I
those
was in your
letters.
very first DCJS
We
class.
found out with those letters, man.
You brought someone in from Farnborough to teach you the landmark.
Says he'll call right back.
Marcus Hodges was one of our early instructors as well.
Of course, I'm sure back then, neither one of us would have thought we'd be sitting here together today.
No doubt. I forget that farmer guy's name. I forget that. That's a blast from the past, though.
He worked at the jail,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Gosh, I can remember everything except for his name.
Flag governor, flags, half staff again. I swear flags are at half staff.
They never went back
more
up.
than their
What are they down for now? Because they never went back up. The Queen's not buried yet.
Veterans Day or something like D-Day, something.
Huh.
I'm certain. holiday.
Dan, you have any?
Because you know they're still technically down.
Yeah, they'll stay down. They're down more than they're up. Flags are.
I know, I hate that.
And they like looking for a parking lot. Parking lot.
Yes, we are making very good progress. Todd is my hero on many fronts.
Yeah.
And Todd, I'm sorry, Todd is our guy.
I know.
Nominating committee. Todd's gonna do it.
Oh, yes, for the nominating committee?
Yeah.
Okay. good.
We just don't, quite frankly, in this, I'd be happy to tell you, we just don't have Mr. Nelson on it. Mr. Nelson doesn't want to be on it because that's superintendent. So maybe Todd's gonna
All right,
sit on it.
thank you.
But yeah, Todd is heroically making charges forward. And,
2.6.
you know, it really depends on location.
An
The
hour.
Willow Lawn area is the end now.
Just for
I'm not
the,
quite sure the end of the polls is gonna be. Willow
Does
Lawn.
that include
No, I know
all the
it's-
benefits and everything else?
wait a second, for the, that was total GRTC, but let me go back to some transportation line. Chris, for the,
Keeping it out of the press.
transportation
Every
line for
time
the
I
collective
talk
bargaining
about how
staff,
excited I am,
it's 2.45 million, which is inclusive of the wages, social security, Medicare, retirement benefits. So it's about
So 2.45 million and
it's about
a
$3.
dollar.
a dollar. That's not what I thought.
That was at the staffing levels last year.
Yeah.
2.45 is the
per dollar.
per dollar,
Per
right?
But
hour.
that's $3. That's $3.
Oh, that's for $3?
That's for $3.
Oh,
that's
well,
fantastic.
that's
About
not
800
nearly
grand.
as bad.
That's great news.
That's not nearly as bad as I thought.
So
it was.
conservatively, we go $1 million conservatively, every dollar we go, it's $1 million. Because we give out full staff.
Yeah,
Because that's all- he said that's
This is
all
on, this was on existing,
Yeah.
there was about 200.
He said it was 2.6 if you did, all staff.
324
For
staff.
transportation staff. It was
2.6.
2.4. That was 324 staff. So now we moved it up to another 25.
So conservatively, you go up $1 million an hour. And you'd be
More
good.
like you said. Yeah.
That's,
Like, we have that number in the county, I'm sure you have it, we look at it all the time, we raise it by a dollar, what is it, teacher's pay, if you raise it by this, it's what, every dollar.
Yeah, if I had the 25 folks on there, it would be about
You
2.6
know-
million for $3. So
You know where you have it? You have it in your real estate tax. Casey has it in his head, every penny, what a penny means.
yeah,
$5
JD
million.
knows it,
Penny on real estate is $5 million.
but you know that, I know that, and right, I know what it is, every single penny, I know that now.
yeah, you know,
That's how you live.
Yeah, penny's worth $5 million.
So how are you guys going to do a $312 million bond issue with no additional revenue?
$511 million.
We're doing 540
No
with
additional-
no, we're doing 540 with no additional.
Theirs is the same as us. Our debt
Yeah.
capacity is
Yeah,
very
that's
low.
why, because our debt capacity can, would be otherwise paid down enough that we can, just keep budget where it is.
So the mechanics.
Like we paid off our house,
Yeah,
our
exactly.
a significant
Put all
portion of
bonds
our
on
house, so
there.
now our mortgage costs us, so now we can afford to take on some more mortgage.
So that would.
For lack of a
that would
better
take it to
term.
2.67 million.
We assume a 2.5% growth over 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's all we need to be able to, cover our,
900 grand per dollar. So if we then increase.
It's the stuff, it's not stuff, like, not your fault specifically, but like the CBT, like the sneaky dollars, like the recycling dollars, you're out, so that just.
well,
jacked
it's,
up our-
you know, I mean,
It's fine.
it's crazy though what they want.
Oh, no doubt, but we look at it a different way, like we talked about just yesterday, your landfill that you use, the Shoesmith one.
Choose them.
You have 2 or 3 years left, that's full.
Yeah.
So I know you guys are discussing what's next.
Well,
We're gonna get Cumberland,
so
or
the
we're gonna
truth
get
is,
Amelia,
I'm the
we're gonna-
only one discussing what's next.
You
There's
need
nobody
to
else, and I'm
discuss
like, you
fast.
cannot put your head in the sand. We're gonna be screwed.
Here's the thing you need to use you're shutting down recycling. That doesn't mean people,
We're not
I'll
shutting
just
down
stop.
recycling.
they're
We're
making them go
switching.
get it on their own, which they're not. You know, that's gonna
Well-
limit the number. Where are those bottles and stuff gonna go?
Well, our, recycling center, our, convenience centers will take them for free.
People are gonna put it there. So
They do,
it's gonna
but
go- that stuff is gonna go to your landfill.
it's gonna go to a landfill. It won't go to ours because it's not gonna be open.
That's what I'm saying. So it's gonna
And
increase.
you know how many transfer stations we have in the county? Besides our 2 convenience centers?
So I'm just saying, you're gonna get on that people mover at the airport, right? Your runway to Shoesmith in 2 to 3 years, I'm told, your runway is getting faster, way faster, which means Cumberland is gonna be, I don't think Cumberland's gonna be ready by the time you need it.
And we need transfer stations. I can't even get any board members to talk about a transfer station. I was willing to put one in my district and people were like, they didn't want me to put a transfer station in my district because they didn't want to have to put one in there.
Yeah, I just think getting out of
I'm
the
like,
recycling
it's gonna
business
have to come.
is not optimal right now.
Well, it's not, but the cost that is associated with it is. We
And
feel
that's why
like
we look
our
at
citizens
the
can
service.
go over to the trash service, which all of them are extremely.
You definitely can.
No sense waiting for him.
He's gonna be all
He said 2 things came up. Yeah, so-
right. Take us through it, John.
All right, we got Sandra?
Yes.
You order?
But you're right, we got a problem and nobody else wants to look at it.
this is the presentation entitled State Operating Assistance, or State Formula Operating Assistance. So this allocation process is annual, multi-step performance improvement process, based off of audited data. And this process is reviewed by TISDAC, which is the Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee, triannually. And TISDAC is an advisory body to the state. So this year was one of the years that we did review the funding formula. If you go to the next slide, I'll take you through the steps.
So I'm sorry, is triennially 3 times a year or once every 3 years?
Once every 3 years.
Okay. Just trying to make sure. 'Cause I
What
thought
am
it
I
was
supposed to be
triennial,
looking
not
at?
annual.
So the next slide is the step 1 transit
Yeah,
sizing.
you got it.
Sorry, I was trying to be efficient.
Okay.
So this is based on the current funding formula. Step 1 is transit sizing. This is the state's attempt to make sure that larger agencies get more money because they have more operating budgets than the smaller agencies. So in order to size an agency, 50% of that comes from just the operating cost from that budget. 30% is based on ridership, and 10% is based on VRH, and 10% is VRH is the vehicle revenue hours, VRM is vehicle revenue miles. So the amount of service that you're putting out on the street. It's 2 different ways to measure it. If you go to the next slide, step 2. So after they size the agencies, then they do what they call a performance adjustment. They adjust that previously determined size weight based on how an agency has performed over the past 4 years in these 5 size performance weights that are listed below. You'll see that the packs have these passengers. So 3 of the 5 involve your ridership, and 2 of them involve your cost, or 3 involve your cost. So you do well if you provide a lot of ridership for the amount of service that you're putting out on the street, and you do well if you have efficient costs. It's not expensive service per hour or per mile.
So they actually do rate you based on your performance, not just, hey, we'll go waste all the money so we have a higher operating cost so that we can get more money.
Exactly. So on the next slide, step 3, the funding allocations. Each agency has 5 normalized size performance weight factors. So they basically take that previous step and try to kind of normalize it, and they come up with that total agency funding allocation. And that is what the model initially suggests that an agency will get in operating assistance. And then the 4th step is they apply a funding cap. Back in 2018, when this performance-based funding model was initially adopted by GRTC, they took a look to try and find what a threshold should be for a cap, and they kind of settled out around 30%. So that's what's still in place now. So the operating assistance can amount to no more than 30% of agencies' operating budget. And if there's any money left over after going through these 4 steps, they kind of spread it out around everyone who's under that cap. And that's how it works. So if you go to the next slide, this shows what the FY21 operating allocation is. Apologies that I don't have 22 on hand for GRTC's data. But GRTC is the 4th agency from the left there. You'll see we received around $12-ish billion in operating assistance. For reference, our funding cap would be at around 17.5 if we were to get a 30% cap. So because this is performance based, and you go back to step 2 when you kind of look at what we're graded on for the performance piece. GRTC has done really well relative to other agencies with its ridership post-pandemic. Overall, throughout the state, ridership decreased from FY19 to FY21 by about 53% statewide. GRTC, as you've heard at the board meetings, our local is right at what we were at in FY19. Express and Pulse are still lagging, but we're still making gains on those modes. So we're in really good shape. A lot of agencies are still down in 50% And then on the, BRM, BRH side, the amount of service being put on the street, that was a lot more stable for all agencies across the state than ridership was, but that still went down 9%, between 19 and 21. GRTC, we held off on making cuts, longer than a lot of agencies did. And then, we've only really had to make some significant cuts with the operator shortage here recently. So it definitely behooves us in this performance-driven funding model to keep our ridership as high as possible, to try and cut as little service as possible in response to these operator shortages. Because we're definitely going to be rewarded if this model stays largely the same. So I did mention that this is one of the years that TISDAC reviewed the operating model. There was a lot of uncertainty about data. Virginia Railway Express, they have had much more significant ridership declines than many of the other agencies around the state. And so they would kind of be a big loser, for lack of a better word, in this performance-based model. So there's a lot of concern around the state of, how do we make DRE whole, or at least keep them running, and invest on the operating side, what we have on the capital side, but at the same time continue to reward good performance. So because that conversation is such a sticky wicket, TISDAC sort of punted to the state until the spring. So in the spring, we're going to take it up again. But I will say that the consensus amongst the TISDAC members, I'm one of them, I serve on that board as a representative of the Virginia Transit Association. The consensus is the formula is working as intended. So we don't really want to do a lot to change that, to alter that performance driven approach.
Based on that, that would probably move us third to the left after the next cycle of.
So based on initial projections, GRTC would hit our funding cap, that 30% cap, because we're just doing so well.
Our cap is 17 at the moment, you said?
I believe it's about
It's up a little
17 and a
over.
half.
So that would be, we would get 5 million more than we're currently
So
getting.
in the adopted fiscal 23, the state of Virginia is 19.5 million.
Sorry.
So
For fiscal,
for this year that we just adopted the budget, the operating budget for July 1
so
of
that's an
22.
increase of 7 million.
Yeah, so that I think is what the cap is, and then I think
The cap would move to 19 because of,
19 and a half, yeah.
because the 60, because our revenue grew.
But our predicted allocation would also be 19, right? We hit the cap.
Yes, I believe so. And I think it's relatively, we're expected to be, what Julie was on, we were about flat at that for the
There
next
you
couple
are.
of years.
But that's what I'm talking about, and that's unpredictable, right? Because you never know. That's the stuff that you slide aside, you use good capital projects, give Adrian the freaking go and run, and you use steady dollars to fix the salary problem. Like that's what we just got to start talking about over time, because then we can't fix the salary problem based on these dollars, because you never know year to year. Because this next question I'm going to ask John is the expectation of 1015 in fiscal 21. Is there an expectation out of the state? I know it's a dart. It's not going to decrease. I mean, it should be 100 or more in the future, right? I mean, you never know though.
Well, our flexible, the way we have done, and you'll do this, the flexibility is in what we're doing with this federal money.
Right.
That can go one way or the other. This has to be operating money, doesn't it? And we have to use it for operating.
You have to use this money properly.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you fill
It's
the
funny.
operating money, then
Yeah.
there's always some way that.
I know, but I'm saying,
What
the
does
way we
VRE
get
stand for?
paid,
I know you.
the way we play is in that federal money.
VRE? Rail.
What's the E stand for?
Virginia Railway Express.
Express.
Yeah,
And then
that's the Northern Virginia commuter. rail.
PRTC? PRTC?
PRTC, I believe that's Potomac.
Potomac.
Transit. They're up in Northern Virginia.
Oh, is it?
It's a transit, it's a bus transit.
So everything
So
that's
that's
at the
Loudon
top of the
and,
list, except for GRTC, is all in Northern Virginia.
Right, so this is.
Hampton Roads.
I'm sorry, Hampton Roads, that's right.
These are the top.
There's a Blacksburg
Top
one.
half of the largest half of the state agencies.
The Petersburg one was pretty
Sam, that
small
was,
too.
yeah, Sam, that was awesome.
Yeah, Petersburg
Sorry,
OpEx
thank
is
you.
relatively small. They're like 2018, they're about 3.6 million in OpEx. But they're a function of the city of Petersburg, so a lot of shared services are done by the city.
You addressed my question about where you kind of foresee, and I know it's a dollar, I know it's a guess. Do you see any threats behind us? Do you see threats from PRTC or Alexandria? Do you see threats? Our ridership is back. I think it's back stronger than Fairfax, Northern Virginia, to be quite honest with you. I know it is. Do you see threats behind us or more opportunities in front of us to move left on this chart?
Our threats are our drivers, right?
No, I mean, from other agencies also being smart, like them tweaking their formulas and threatening from, you know what I mean?
Yes, I
Threatening
think
our
there
market
are
share.
threats, from other agencies that are really interested in fair trading going in that direction.
Yes.
I think they're the ones that are seeing more ridership recovery.
That's-
And as the rest of the
yep.
city ends up in ridership, our share is gonna go down.
That's the answer I'm looking for, because we're talking about free ridership and all that stuff. My next question was, in your opinion, are we maximizing our formula efficiency? And you answered it already. You said we do well compared to our peers. My recommendation would be keep your efficiency, keep making sure this formula works. I think your attention to it is spectacular, and watch our back for threats of other people who are like, free fares, how do I get more ridership? How do I increase my market share of these dollars and catch up to GRTC? That would be what that's awesome.
Julie talked about was the comparison of the net of the fare, because you had gross fare numbers less the cost was roughly about $3.5 million. So we went from 12 to 19 and a half. So on the FISDAC based on ridership and expansion. So I think that's what Lincoln wanted to see.
And we can't make that up with, if we started charging fares, we would lose.
Lose something.
No.
Which is your exactly right. That's why Lincoln wanted to see it, because it's proven his point. Which his point is proven to us already, but he's trying to prove his point, which makes sense. Keep the formula efficiency and get rewarded on it too.
That the fare-free service has been netting us.
I have to tell you the truth, it drives me totally insane and makes me schizophrenic, but I understand why we have to
Because
do it.
didn't we discuss this? We had a discussion. What do fares mean? Wasn't it 5 million?
It's like
5.8
something.
5.8 million is what fares.
That's gross.
Yeah, it's gross, and then there's the cost of collection, and
And
security
security
fares,
and all
armored cars, and all those stuff.
It's the same conversation as Jimmy's hotels right now. They don't have staff. So they're cutting their rooms in half, but they're charging way more money and they're making the same, right? So it's efficiency and volume, right? Makes perfect sense. Sam, as always, thank you.
What's up? Source funding model.
Okay, so that's the second my presentation, page 3.
Is
So
that this?
yes, sir. Page 3. So on here, the source funding, what I ended up listing here was the operating contributions starting with. So the largest operating contributions coming from Cbta, which is budgeted, our total operating contributions in our budget is 68.8 million. 21.4 million is from Cbta. The TISDAC that Sam just reviewed was 19.5 million. Then you have the city of Richmond's operating contribution of 8.6.
Excuse me, on the TISDAC, the 19.5 is fiscal 23 money based on fiscal 22 performance or fiscal 21 performance?
Well, it's from 3 years ago, right? If
3
they
years
did it
ago?
this year, then it would be based on.
What, yeah, I'm
19,
trying to see
right?
what the gap is between,
So are we
Because if they
referring
do
to
it
the
once-
GRTC's FY 24 projection of what we will get?
No, this
No,
is what we
we're
got.
gonna get in
This is what
20,
we got.
FY
The
23.
19.5 is
April.
based on what,
So they've been using FY 19 data.
That's what I
They have a
thought,
whole
yeah,
bunch
that's
of-
it's once every 3 years.
So this is like 3-year gap, which
And so
also
this
creates a
year, if we
strange.
perform well this year, it actually carries us for 3 years.
Oh, they'll hold it for 3 years?
Well, it's a 3-year
They don't renew
review,
it.
right?
The review of the formulas every 3 years.
The
But the,
formula review.
The allocation should change every year.
Okay, all right. So the formula is based on 19.
Yeah,
the
but
allocation is
the
based on
allocation
19.
is based on the previous fiscal year, what fiscal year?
The allocation, they are using the formula as it currently stands, is based on 4 years of data, previous 4 years.
Averaged.
An average, yes. So, but what they have been doing is kind of setting aside that piece of the formula and just using pre-pandemic data.
So they've been using 19, even though it's supposed to use 4 years.
But now it's gonna get back to real world again?
Probably not.
We don't know.
I bet you they wait another year or two.
I
before
mean, I
it goes
think
back to-
through FY 24 at this point, it has to, even if they would change the formula next year, that's got to go through the Commonwealth Transportation Board for approval. And, there's
I'm just looking, what I'm seeing is what figures they're plugging into the formula. And you're saying that the idea is that it would be a 4-year average, but in fact, because of the COVID thing, they've just been using 2019 data.
Yeah, I can't tell you if it's all 19 or if it was the average.
Okay, thank you.
But if they are using just 19s instead of the 4-year average, they probably still need another, at least one more year before they can go back
Go
to
back and do it.
using a 4-year data. Because it's just not gonna be accurate enough.
So
Sorry, John.
that's right. So this is, so previously, you know, the county of Henrico and Chesterfield were considered purchase services, but now because of the CBTA legislation, they become characterized as operating contributions. So you can see them, they're all listed here. City of Petersburg is $200,000. And then the next group, the federal formula 5307 Flex, you know, that's our formula award that we split through the UZA with Petersburg, but we have budgeted it in fiscal 23, the PM preventive maintenance portion, which this is 80% of our eligible maintenance expenses. And then the ADA is capped at 10% of the award, which is 1.2 million. This would be going towards funding paratransit. And then we have some other small operating grants. And then in the state, we have the TRIP grant, which the $4.5 million of which the $1 million is in the Richmond's 8.6. And then we have other operating grants, which are primarily IP based. So flipping over on the next page, I just tried to kind of just characterize, you know, the governing basis of the different revenue, the operating contributions. You know, obviously the CBTA is based upon the Virginia state statute, where we're getting 15% of the CBTA fund. The TISDAC is obviously by Virginia statute, and then the city of Richmond, county of Chesterfield, and Henrico, their minimum funding levels are now dictated by the CBTA legislative statute. The federal formula is based on a formula award, which I'll kind of show you a little bit later, upcoming slides. And those costs are reimbursement based. That's what when we had the explanation is that revenues are unfavorable because operating expenses are favorable. So that's because we don't have the expense to reimburse. In the same way for the TRIP grant, it's also reimbursement based as the other ones. So flipping over to page 5 on these, you know, the restrictions of use, the CBTA.
Excuse me, with regard to the 5307 money that's reimbursement based, does that mean that we don't get the money, or that it would go to capital rather than operating?
Well, we get the award, we then program it. We file with the FTA as to, of our $12 million award, we're going to use $1.2 million for ADA support and $8.3 million for PM, and the balance goes to capital. So if we don't use it for PM or ADA, we can reserve it for capital.
Goes to capital, so we don't lose the money, it just gets reallocated into our capital fund. Okay.
That's why we,
Yeah.
honestly, we have not programmed our 18-19, 19-20, 20-21 award yet. We have the split letters, as you'll see later. The money is ours. We haven't programmed it yet. Specifically for the PM, we're working down our 2017-18 PM and ADA and cost of contracting money.
But that's all basically one-time money. It's money that's out there that we can have, but it's not recurring money.
Right, that's already previously.
So that's
awarded.
money that if we can use towards shelters or something along those lines, we should.
Or, and a whole bunch of other capital.
Yeah.
uses.
As long as it fits with how it was so forth,
award
materials.
was
Yeah.
done. Okay.
So what I was trying to go through on slide 5 here is the restriction to use. Obviously, the CBTA money is for operating expenses and capital, and is governed by the Regional Public Transportation Plan that's approved at the CBTA board. It's approved at the GRTC board to go to the CBTA, then CBTA approves it. So our fiscal 23 plan was approved on June 17th of 22, so we're all set for fiscal 23 with CBTA. So I put in the state of Virginia, the TISDAC, the city of Richmond, county of Chesterfield, and Henrico. I'm calling them basically unrestricted transit operating expenses with an asterisk, because those are based upon the GRTC adopted operating budget. This board controls what those uses are, but they're specifically, we're funded and they have to be used for transit operating expenses.
So if we were to put projects in the operating budget that are non-capital related, right, ongoing projects, that would qualify.
Correct, I believe so.
What are you thinking of, an ongoing project?
Would anything with
Non-capital
bus stops anything regarding bus stops be non-capital?
That's capital.
I don't-
Unless it's cleaning.
So is it 100%?
I mean, there's physical erection of structures and pads and so forth, that
That's
would be
gonna be
capital
all
in
capital.
All
nature.
capital.
Yeah.
But then if you're
Your own-
maintaining it,
Maintaining it?
we got power washers and so forth that go
If
out.
it was already in and you had to repair it because the structure got damaged, that would be operated,
Lot of
but to put it
acquisition.
in,
That's
it's.
like you're painting and, you know, if the roof needed repair, that's repairs as
Land
well.
and lot acquisition capital?
Yeah,
A lot of these things are in right of ways that are in already public land anyway.
Gotcha.
Some other people own.
Just trying to be as creative as I possibly can.
No, I
Use
understand. It's a
projects
good
though as
question.
operating
It's a
without
good
the big
question.
capital, we can use those dollars.
but I don't think you can call any of that capital unless you're replacing
But the
something.
reason I'm asking, and I just want to make it really clear, is that I consider funding like safe and non-safe. And TISDAC funding to me is not predictably safe because it's formula based and it kind of ups and goes. And County of Chesterfield, County of Henrico contributions, those are safe. Those are in the
Pretty much,
CBTA.
it's
CBTA
legislation.
money is
Required
safe.
by law. so we
CBTA money is
expect
safe, it's coming. So like, it's projectable.
The only risk with the CBTA is when they were talking about, when they're
Gas
doing the
tax
bonding,
models.
yes, the bonding models and so forth, you know, eventually if there's a conversion or over to other source vehicles, the gasoline portion and
Yeah.
diesel portion possibly may be at risk.
That's the only reason I'm trying to be super diligent and smart about how we can use them at TISDAC money to not tie us down
What's the
to
most
every
flexible?
single year. And then we get a surprise one year, the formula doesn't work out or ridership and you go, man, holy crap, I'm counting on that 3.8 million, where is it? And I wrote the word, I mean, you went through it, John, but 19.5, I wrote the word confidence level. Like you would be confident to put that number there or you would put it.
I
You
think we
would
get
be
a
at the
couple
time you
years to look
budget
out.
probably
You know, that's what-
for 1 year, but not for, you couldn't budget that
Not
for
in
a 5-year
perpetuity.
formula, but you could do it in a 1-year increment with confidence.
And it's just like in the original, you know, last year for fiscal 22 on TISDAC, it was 12 million, and then we got the incremental $3 million of funding.
Yeah.
You know, in the May, June, and July.
Gotcha.
So to be quite specific in terms of the CBTA money, our initial strategy was to basically create a 12-month delay in the spending of CBTA revenue. So we actually hold a year's CBTA revenue in arrears. And Julie's reasoning for that initially, and this is where you got here, John, was because she had no idea, CBTA had made no commitments or procedural commitments to the approval and establishment of a budget. And therefore, she foresaw the possibility that the CBTA money for FY 2022 would not be able to be spent immediately. We wouldn't be able to run. It might come in 4 or 5 months later. So to be absolutely safe, we're pocketing the thing. But we got a lot of money standing around for 12 months.
We had this discussion
Yes,
yesterday,
yeah.
Mr. Nelson and I discussed it, and I'll share it with Jim, so, and you from a Richmond Chesterfield perspective. We are cognizant, and I would like to have the public, because they can see it. I don't want them to ever look at GRTC and be like, man, they're flush with cash, let's stop funding that.
Right.
Because that happens sometimes.
Right.
And if you put that money away and it's sitting there, jurisdictions look at that and they go, well, Lincoln did it for the right reasons, but he said, "You got plenty of money, I'm not gonna do my million this year." And like that kind of philosophy, I'd much rather give the go to some projects and raise our pay and invest and grow, because we know CBTA now is stable. It's stable, it's there, and it's coming, so let's.
So that might be something we could attack,
Yeah.
is that particular.
I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea,
Well,
originally
maybe
be
the
cautious,
first time.
but now that reserve is there, and CBTA money is coming, I think, relatively.
I mean, in the board package you'll get, you don't have it in
Yeah,
here.
it's-
That's a mail deal.
But it's been pretty consistently predictable.
Yeah, as of the end of August 31st, there's $25.2 million sitting in the combination of Wells Fargo and the
I just
LGIP,
hate that.
which is after funding the first quarter of fiscal 23. So that's the money that's basically, it's fiscal 23 and 24 operating,
And it's still there,
still there.
and it's both good and bad, right? It's great.
But it hangs around for a year.
We have to begin.
We may be able to work at that.
We need, this is just Dan. We could show some wins now. let's win a few ball games now, right? Let's get the staffing, you know what I mean? Like, that's awesome, but that's where I'll focus.
Well, and then what's in that $21 million for the fiscal 23 operating budget is less. I mean, the last 2 months were 2.6 million, averaging about, 2.6 times 12 is 30 something million dollars. We put in the budget of 21. The VDOT forecasts were about 28 million. They're a little bit, it's all dependent. I mean, you see some fluctuations because the excise tax for gasoline and diesel, the volume went down because of the prices went up. But we're seeing larger 7/10% on sales tax, right? Because everything else costs more.
That's right.
So you get one gives, one takes away.
Yep.
So this one, so slide 5 was just kind of just going through. So obviously the PM is 80% of the actual, the ADA was limited on 10% of the formula fund award. The other operating grants are restricted by the programming, and the trip is unrestricted transit operating expenses. So, moving over to the next slide. The operating revenue that we have here is just about $2 million. The majority is the VCU cash program, and then we have advertising revenue. $425,000 is the VCU bonds towards naming, and the bus advertising, which is currently suspended, is about $180,000 that was budgeted for the year.
Do we think that that's going to, when we reinstate it, that's going to be met, or is that going to be a shortcoming in the budget?
I think we could probably meet that. What do you think, Cheryl?
Once we reinstate, we can still hit the 180.
We're looking at sponsorships as well, I think, right? To replace to get a sponsorship program. And also, we're looking at maybe doing this thing in-house so we don't give 33% of every advertising dollar to a broker, which is what we've been doing. It's ridiculous. So
VCU, I know we had this discussion, they're okay, they're in this budget for 23, but there's been no assurance in the 24 budget that 1.25 is there. That's where it's been.
With the 1 year agreement.
yeah, we really need to work it down. I mean, we negotiated that hard back when we had fares, and we got them to cut their buses that were going back and forth.
The problem is the leverage and the value added. Our argument is very difficult to make. Everybody else riding for free. I'm not paying. I mean,
I just talked to the VCU president, vice president for MCV, and he's looking at having to give some of his employees some kind of bonus to help pay their parking. So VCU has a tremendous advantage. I mean, there's something in it for them.
Because they don't have to come up with parking lots and parking for them.
And he doesn't have to, he's looking at gives them.
It's free.
Well,
It's
that's
free
true.
at the moment.
I'm the president of VCU. It's free. Well,
Huh?
But let's assume it's free again next year. It's a tough argument to make to VCU.
Oh, no, I agree, it's hard, but I'm saying,
Can I have that $1 million again?
well, it's interesting that they stuck with it. I mean, we negotiated, yeah.
Super
Well, what
glad
we
they
might
did.
need to do is get VCU to switch it over from what they're doing to a sponsorship program.
We also put
And
on,
then they
the-
get to put their name on the.
we also put on an extra pulse.
You're
extra
right,
pulse
but
ride
maybe
for them,
we,
to move it to 10 minutes rather than 15 minutes. So there was some other, but you're right to focus on this. And also to look, I think, at the future of other sponsorships, where other companies or destination places maybe.
The other piece is our other income, about $500,000, majority of it's RideFinders and interest income. So majority of our income source is operating contributions. And so flipping over to slide 7, this is kind of, I went back and just showed the recent federal formula awards, the 5307 and 5309, and kind of incorporated this split. So the awards are to the UZA. So you can see for 5307 in fiscal 22, the award to the UZA is 17.124 million, which is significantly up from the 13.314 million from fiscal 21. So,
Sorry, what's UZA?
what do you mean? It's the area, it's the service area.
All right,
I don't know what the acronym means.
zone,
Urbanized zone area.
urban zone, something like that.
So we're in the UZA with Petersburg. So historically, there was a 90-10 split in 17. It moved to 91-9 in 18. 90, 10, and 19, 20, and 21. I arrived in 21 and I asked, how do we get that? So they get an explanation. So what we had proposed, and I'll walk you through that later, is currently 94.73, basically almost 95.5, based upon a formula. So as you can see, these are, within the, so within our award for the 11, if we're looking at 21, the 11,982, the 10%, that's where we get the 1.2 million for the ADA, and then the PM of 8.3 is in there. So theoretically, we only have about $2 million of that for true capital if you use it and flex it for PM. Here comes Lincoln. So the next page, on page 8, this was the federal formula funds awards. This was COVID relief. So there were 3 issuances. There was the CARES Act in April of 20, the coronavirus response relief supplemental appropriation in January 2021, and the ARPA in March of 2021. So you can see that the sum of the awards that were there. The CARES Act and CRISA were at 90-10, and based upon discussions with Petersburg, we ended up getting a 97.24, 2.76% split for the American Rescue Act. And what that was is because this was based upon the 2018 OPEX is how all the relief acts. So very simplistically, our operating expense was 48.96 million. Petersburg was 3.61. We were 93.1% of the UZA. They were 6.9. So the 97 is basically retroactively taking the 93.1, recapturing what we gave away for the CARES Act and CRISA. So 3%, they're hung on 90-10, 3% of that award, the total award was almost 70 million. It's about $2 million of incremental money that we wrestled back into our area from Petersburg. This is the ongoing discussion that Cheryl's going to have with their folks. Because Julie and I have been having this discussion since February of 21.
And who does that discussion take place with?
The general manager, and we had discussions jointly. We involved the Plan RVA as well as the Crater.
If we don't agree, who's the arbitrator?
There really isn't one. The DRPT will not get involved. FTA will not get involved.
We had the discussion, we can't afford for them to not agree either, because then it goes then the money doesn't
Correct.
flow.
FTA does reach out to my staff and asking when we're going to get the split letter and then program it. So we're saying we're in discussion, but if you want to, I can walk you through it really quickly, but on slide 12.
Did I see somewhere that Petersburg pays in 200,000 in you?
Yeah, for the express service.
So it looks like they're trying to get enough money out of us to give it back to us.
Yeah, but the cost of that.
That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, the cost of the service is probably greater than 200,000.
Well, I'm sure it is, because if Chesterfield, which has one line, is paying more than that, then I'm sure that the cost of the service to Petersburg costs more than that. I mean,
So,
Oh, yeah, no, 200 does not cover that.
well, I'm not disputing that part of it, but it looked like to me that all they're trying to do is figure out a way that they don't have to pay GRTC anything, they break even, and that's probably what their thought process is. How do we get back to even?
Well, they're entitled to, they run a bus company and they're entitled to some percentage.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they're paying GRTC 200,000 a year. So my thought is they're trying to figure out how to make the split get as close to the 200,000 they're giving back to us a year that they're basically not touching their budget with it. I could be wrong, but that's the way it
Well,
appears.
just for your information, if you ever want to take over the Petersburg Bus Company, they'd be glad to have you do it.
I absolutely do. Anything
That
to
was
do with it.
proposed to us several times, so.
Is that right?
Yeah, it hadn't been this last year, but we dealt with it twice, so but I think.
We almost got to run their school.
I think each time we looked at it, we found that it really was not
We didn't
advantageous,
want
but
that either.
I think it's always worth looking at.
So with this on slide 12, this basically is a model that basically utilizes the various factors, which you'll see on slide 13. Slide 13 is the FTA table 3, which shows the award to the UZA of 17. Slide 14 is table 5, which basically is all these different apportionment data unit values. And slide 15 kind of shows some of the NTD data. So with this color coded, it just kind of shows you where the information comes from. So basically the sources of this is FTA tables and data from the 2019 NTD data that we submit as well as PAT submits. So what this model is based upon is replicating the FTA formula award to the UZA and just using the information within the NTDs to apportion it. There is some data corruption that Petersburg has. They're not a full NTD reporter. And if you go to slide 15, this is what we were trying to talk about. So this is the UZA population analysis. So in their NTD filing in 2019, Petersburg uses a population of 72,000. GRTC uses a population of 449,000. So if you sum up based on the April 1, 2020 census, Petersburg, Colonial Heights, and Hopewell are about 75,000 populace. GRTC, you sum up Richmond, Chesterfield County, and Henrico County, you're about 925. So the sum of that is 1 million. So the FTA guidance is, when they determine population, is the number of people within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route service. So there's a discrepancy. They seem to be accounting almost all their population. The second column, square mileage, you can see that the sum of their PMT in the Tri-City area is about 40 square miles, but in their NTD, they're only saying it's 7 square miles. So they get this huge population density number, which basically skews the math.
Yeah.
So, the NTD for the agency, it's 1,938 people per square mile. Ours is 1980. We're kind of on the norm. So when you plug in 10,000 people per square mile in Petersburg, which is unrealistic, it skews the number. So what I've done is I've normalized it back to the 1983, and going back to that slide 12, the approach to Petersburg was, let's talk about how we have consistent variables of input. Let's use a standardized model that's very transparent. They have, I think it was I've had at least 3 telephone meetings, and we had 2 face-to-face meetings, and then, we ended up negotiating, agreeing upon the ARPA split in August. So that's how that got done. And then we had committed to get together and resolve the fiscal 22, 5307 and 5339 awards by end of fiscal 21. That didn't happen. 3 or 4 follow-up emails. The Crater Cities TPO told me that Petersburg was not interested in further discussions. So we just basically went through CBTA. I showed them our model. CBTA reviewed it. There were discussion about putting on their TAC committee but that's putting a level of bureaucracy on something that shouldn't be. It should be a decision between Petersburg and GRTC. So Charles on deck next.
CBTA doesn't serve Petersburg, so how do they?
But they're over us, so they're our TPO, or Pine RVA is our TPO.
So we calculate 925, but we report 449 because that's the number that lives within that radius of the
Correct.
stuff. They calculate 74 and they report
Right.
72.
So
So what's stopping us from reporting?
Well, so
800,000?
in this model, basically what I took in here on page 12, I give them their 72, but I limit the density at the UZA square footage and basically the density per square mile.
Yeah.
And then the balance falls into GRTC. There's only 2 of us. So if I give them everything else except for, and normalize the density, I get this split of which is 94.73 and 5.27. That's the split that makes sense. And they like 90-10.
Well, of course they
Sure
do.
they do.
And through this course of the discussion, we said, we'll come up with an alternate model.
Or show a proof point.
Correct. So my whole thing with, discussions with them and their previous director of finance was that we're in the public sector. We need to be very transparent. We need to be able to sit there and say that we take this number, we use these factors that the FTA publishes. We're using the NTD data that you're putting in. If it's wrong, it's wrong, but we're going to normalize it. We're not going to accept ridiculous, 7, 7 square mileage and getting a ridiculous population density. If I put in their actual, the split would go to like 85-15, which is not realistic. So that's why we said, let's discuss how we define the variables
Petersburg puts in 7 square miles for the total population.
for the service area in the,
Well, to be honest with you, their service area probably is only 7 miles, but they can't count Colonial Heights and Oakville then because they ain't serving Colonial Heights. and
so,
Oakville.
so they, and they even said they come a little bit into the bottom of Chesterfield. So the population, it's one of the, yeah.
Into Matoka, okay, they probably go over to Ettrick, they go over to VSU. That's how they're saying that, yeah, okay.
So there's data corruption, or there's issues that we're comparing an apple and an orange. And what we're trying to do is just like, let's come together at Harvard, but their basis is more emotional. As you can see on that, in 2018, we went to 91 and 9. So I think that there was a previous agreement to start walking it up from the 90-10. But that somehow fell apart. I think my predecessor went back to the 90-10. So yeah, I'm an accountant, I'm a fan.
We'll support them on the casino. No, we can't do that because Richmond wants it, so we can't do that.
We just gotta keep,
I'm trying to figure out a way to get there.
we'll keep up that
Yeah,
discussion.
no, I had it.
But then also,
I realized what I said after.
what tools do we have?
Let's see, what do they want?
So Cheryl's up next. I think she's gonna try, because Julie and I were.
Four times, Cheryl. He just said it 4
So
times.
clearly, we need to keep up the conversation with Cheryl's end, but then what other tools are available to us? Because that's dollars.
Yeah.
What tools are available to us? Cheryl's can have the conversation, but they're flat out lying on public numbers. So is the media a tool? Or not yet?
I don't
If
think
it
you
goes,
go there
like we're saying,
first.
if it gets to a board resolution, either going through CBTA on TAC or here, it then becomes.
I think I think you might get Plan RVA to try to work with Greater PDC and see if they can get some,
True number?
come to an agreement on how to get formulas because, of course, Greater PDC, which I'm also on, is still trying to get their executive in place. So,
Because they're the guy, because we met with the executive, he's now gone, and then the other
Right.
gentleman.
everybody's gone.
There's one gentleman that's still there, that was, I forget his name, but we met with Martha Heater, and we had both of them in there with us, and they were largely silent on it. It's, you guys figured out. Julie
You
also.
only continue to have an honest conversation when you have honest data, and there's not honest data in the conversation.
Right.
So what's next? I mean, we can get to that, but what's next? Because that's not honest data.
Yeah, I mean, we had
72,000 people are not within the radius.
So we also talked about, do we file it with, submit it to the FDA and say, here it is, we tried in good faith, Petersburg and us cannot come to a resolution agreement, this is what it is.
So is mediation an option in that case?
Well, that's what I asked, but there's no mediator that's,
GRTT, I know that Julie asked if Jen DeBrill would get involved, and the answer was no. So GRTT will not get involved, FTA will not get involved.
Because the administration outside of what GRTC has going on is trying to help Petersburg. So DRPT called Jennifer DeBrew called Julie and just said, based on the administration and the governor and the presentation that he did last month, we're not touching it.
So,
Well, I was almost just meaning
Yeah, any mediator.
a third-party mediator, not tied to one of the transportation agencies. Could Petersburg agree to sit down, agree on a?
They could, but apparently they probably feel like they have the best position because there is no mediator currently. And if we don't come to an agreement, then nobody gets the funds and they know we're not gonna let that happen.
so the FTA obviously doesn't want funds sitting around. By happen chance, we somehow got Petersburg unprogrammed grants, so that they have been programmed multiple years like that. So it's like a waiting game. It's like who has to blink first. So I mean,
And ours is a much bigger,
but we have, like I said,
So they know
I have
what
not
they're
fully programmed 18, 19, 19, 20, and 2021. So
Every 1% that's haggled over is 170 grand. Right? So 5% is 850,000. That's what they're.
You might be talking about real
which is $1 an hour.
That's my point. That's just, it's annoying.
That's a dollar an
I
hour.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that's $1 an hour.
Yeah, that's annoyingly frustrating when a jurisdiction can't even tell the truth. They can't produce bullet point facts. So I'm always of the opinion if they're gonna lie to you, then I'll remove the veil of lying, but I'll defer to it.
Well, I think that their population numbers are relatively close, but their square mile of, if the population is outside of the transit area, then it doesn't count.
Right.
But they're counting all of the
It
population
looks
and
like
only the transit area.
I have not provided details. That schedule was prepared by me, just trying to understand how they're getting that number. I know that they have a part of it, that they take a part of the transit that goes in the lower Chesterfield County.
It's
Well,
insignificant, and they're only running into Chesterfield so that they can pull the people that are there into Petersburg to get the goods and services out of Petersburg instead of getting it from Chesterfield or Colonial Heights. So they're doing it for revenue. They're not doing it because they want to service that part of the county. Like Chesterfield doesn't have to have it. It's something they're doing because they want to get those citizens over to Petersburg.
Okay,
So-
where are we?
all right, so the last one was the
Lincoln's got
CBTA.
something. Hold on, I was like, what do you got?
I was just gonna say, I mean, it almost just feels like it's something that we should probably sit down, maybe with administration, particularly in Chesterfield, because we don't have any leverage in this scenario, but Chesterfield's at the table with us here. I don't, it just, we're dealing with a single lane where we don't have any leverage. If we're not willing to forgo the revenues or go to that, lane.
I
right?
think what
Not
we just
lane,
want
then.
is a fair share, a
Unless
fair
Chesterfield does
split.
something, it's like, well, look, we want our consideration here, we want your
One that's on
consideration
there?
there.
I think we just want a fair split.
Yeah.
Have your leverage.
Fair split that, I mean, we offered, this was my model based upon data that the FDA uses in the same methodology. For a better part of a year, we've asked them to come up with some sort of methodology that we could review, and there is nothing that was produced. It was just that we feel that we're comfortable with 90-10. It's not an, I mean, I'm not. it's not an
90-10 is
allocation.
nice.
That's not a federal allocation methodology.
90-10 is kind. All right, appreciate it.
Then the last one was on page 9 is the Cbta Cpi adjustment. So this on 9 is just it's a section that talks about, I think that we talked about it's anybody that's part of Cbta cannot fund less than 50% of what was appropriated as a public, for public transit as of July 1, 2019. So that's your fiscal 20. So that was the starting point. And then the second part is that we don't have, we had an opinion, but it's not a formal opinion now, as it appears. So it talks about the change in the United States Consumer Price Index for all CPIU as published. It's kind of ambiguous for the previous year, or if it's negative, it's 0. So when we originally were preparing the budget, we had Julie reached out to Eric Gregory, who's the bond counsel for CBTA, and he basically said it should be June to June. So we communicated to us, which obviously is led to the issues that are here because the counties and the city have to have their budgets prior. And as we have our budget, we put in an assumption of 7.5%, and then CPI June to June is 9.1. So now we have this go back, to say we need a supplemental, and
all the
Richmond
budgets
has
are
their own
done.
process. It's not so. The question then came up is, as you can see on slide 11 here, this is your CPIU table. So, I highlighted, June of 19 to June of 22, CPI has changed 15.7, but the state legislation said, okay, so basically there was no adjustment until the start of fiscal 23. So 1 year prior, the June to June is 9.1, as we all read. CPIU is published about 10 to 12 days following the month's end. So August CPIU was just published on Tuesday, I believe. So, it makes it difficult. So the discussion point was, I think what Bonnie Ashley's opinion was, is that the calculation is correct. However, it's you know, the legislation doesn't specifically say, is it an accounting issue where you can pick a different date? Realistically, it should be February to February. So now that we have this first painful year, should we then adopt something that we would know what the number is prior to coming to our board for adoption? And then
That number's an annual number.
Correct.
That's June or July 21 to June of 22.
Yeah.
That's the number, right?
yeah, so I mean, if
And
we
there's a
were
chart that backs that up.
correct, so if we were going to say if we wanted to move it, maybe for 1 year it would be okay from June, theoretically.
June
Say
to
we
the end
wanted
of
to use
December.
February of 23. We could do the change from June of 22 to February 23 for next year, and then for the following year, it would be the February to February to build it in, just so that we would all know, and we're all talking on the same page, so that when we prepare our budget and the counties prepare their budgets and the city prepares their budget, we're all using the same CPIU number, and we have one bite at the apple instead of multiple.
I mean, we could all use the same number that we all agreed upon, but it doesn't mean it's gonna be the number.
Well, I will say we have to get to that February timeline. or else
Yeah,
we're-
it
I
just
mean, doing the
really
mid-year
is a problem.
adjustments.
Yeah, just
Fully agree.
not good.
And it needs to be an annual average.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
whatever, 12 months.
right, for the first year, like I said, since we index to, if we go through this process and then we adjust it, so now we're as of June of 2022. For fiscal 24's budget, if we use the February, we would just use a short indice that year.
Yeah.
And then when you go to do fiscal 25's budget, you do the February to February, you just hook up another year.
But are they saying, we're saying that we don't think that the legislation says we can't do that, but the CBTA is saying that they think we need to stay June to June.
Well, I mean, he shared that opinion, and then when we had this resolution to come back, CBTA wants it to be on their agenda so that Eric Gregory can give an opinion on it, on the legislation. So it's a game.
Share what I think about the opinion on that. I mean, it's an annual average.
Yeah, because it doesn't say when.
I don't need his opinion. I think we just pick the best time frame for the jurisdictions makes sense to me. That's just my theory. And then, this adjustment here, it means 61,000 to the county, it means less than $4,000 to Chesterfield, but it's 160 grand
Yeah,
to the city.
I mean, it needs to be done, for everybody's budget, they need to be able to know what they're budgeting at the time they do their budget,
This is
not trying to
proposed-
figure it out down the road.
Yeah, that resolution passed, but the problem is that Richmond's appropriated ordinance is different than what is on here. So they have to go through additional steps on there. It's just the whole topic here is just to come to a uniform methodology that makes very easy efficiency for budgeting at the city as well as the counties.
So how do we clean this up?
1 second, if you don't mind. And then we'll just add that so it's 160 on the adjustment, right?
Yes.
Right? And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys applied the CPI from the start of CBTA to, this year, as opposed to just looking at 1 year CPI, right?
No, we took your appropriations from your fiscal 20 adopted budget.
That's what I'm saying, which is the start of CBTA.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, and then we just applied the index from the 9.1%, which is June of 21 to June of 22. So we took your appropriations from your fiscal 20 budget, cut it in half, and then applied the 1 year index. That's on the bigger sheet.
Yeah, I guess I'm not an accountant, so I'm struggling with articulating this, but it is, in the first year of CBTA and RICO increased you guys went over the 50% match requirement, right? We did it at 50. This year, when we introduced our budget, we applied a 7.5% CPI. I don't think you all did any CPI adjustment in your introduction. But so essentially over the 2 years, I don't say quite equals out between year 1 and year 2. But, we had gone up 750 in our allocation this year before doing this adjustment to add 160 more.
Well,
I don't really know if I have a point as much just to make sure everyone's aware, because I think Enrico did, I don't remember, it was like $500,000 over the prior match, the first year of CBTA.
That's correct. That's just sitting there waiting for this.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think it in some ways works out, right? Like you guys did not have to increase your CBTA, or excuse me, your GRTC contribution as much this fiscal year, but you had the prior. We did more this year. And I think we're all getting on the same page. Can you explain to me again why the city's budgeted contribution is different than what you account for here? Like why does the city have like some money that goes to capital and some to operating subsidy? Because I would think that,
Well,
you know, in the SHIP, we have my assumption would be that this is our maintenance of effort funding, one number, CPI applied, et cetera. But I often see that what's reported here is different than, because we're essentially, our funding is getting cut into two buckets.
So right from the fiscal 1920 appropriation budget book, Richmond had 15.9 million in operating and about 344 in capital. So first I would just cut that in half. That's what I did for all everybody. So I went to their adopted budget books for their fiscal 20, took whatever they appropriated for transit, and then cut it in half as a starting point.
In 20, does anybody recall what the justification was for the 344? Like why was that a separate? Do you know it?
Yeah, and that was actually just a flat amount that was written on the equipment note and not departmental, as we go towards buses capital. It is always just a line item in the city's budget. So when the grant contract came in, that same number stayed, but it was left for capital items. And in the new one that's coming to the board now, we actually did change it so it's all one.
It's all one.
Restricted, yeah.
Okay.
So
So
you guys actually eliminated that line, departmental and one.
and so going forward, that will be we'll be back to being consistent where it's not.
So that was
There's
just
a city contribution to capital and a city
budget.
contribution.
Just their budget, yeah.
Yeah, that was the way you budgeted, that's why.
And if I go back in time, then you probably remember better than I do. I don't remember whether that equipment note was for additional pulse buses to increase frequency.
I think it was an actual 3%
Forever,
match.
it's in there.
It was forever in there. Okay. Yeah, but to the point, we're getting to a place where it's one maintenance of effort, one operational subsidy, unrestricted, and we'll be reporting that more transparently, I guess is the word I'm looking for here, or easy to read for whether it's a citizen or others to see what the city's contribution is, et cetera, more in line with how the other localities are contributing.
But Adrian, to be specific, in a number of our capital expenditures, we're actually required to have a local match. Is that correct?
Correct, so they are, it's
So-
not on here, so they.
We don't have to budget it separately.
No, I think we've been pulling it out of unrestricted funds.
We have,
They have their budget for the capital, because it's still local match, and then other two jurisdictions do it based on their service lines. So it's a certain percent based on the miles that actually operate, that they get billed for capital, that's also.
Wait a minute.
That's how it was, not
That's
how
how it
we're going.
was. Now it's, yeah.
Now-
Everyone is under.
Now we're all on the
Now, if
same
we need
page.
local match from Richmond, we simply take it out of this one figure that's,
It's two pieces, that and.
CBTA,
Yeah.
2%, 2%.
So it all, we don't need to keep doing it as a separate capital.
Right. The reason it was on there was I wanted to be able to tie back, or should someone at each of the entities looked in their budget book and said, where'd you get the number from? It's on your budget. I recorded the page numbers and like that, so just.
So the change in your budgeting will now make all of us consistent here,
Yes,
when you report it to us.
so do we have a resolution on this issue of what the different jurisdictional contributions are going to be?
Passed in July, right?
Yeah,
FY
FY 23. So
23.
our budget's adopted, the question was going forward, because this.
Yeah, I brought up the fact that I don't think we should be going back to jurisdictions mid-year and asking for an increase. I mean,
Yeah, that
theoretically, it
makes
could be a
sense,
decrease,
obviously,
but
yeah.
So for
it's
the-
not likely, it's
I
gonna.
know, but we had this one particular problem and we were trying to.
So going forward, whether it's by motion or agreement, can we plan that in February, we'll look at July 1 to February for a CPI adjustment, we'll budget based on that, and then the following year, we'll go February to February.
100%, and based on this
But
code,
but
I mean, I don't see why we need an official opinion from Eric.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you guys all agree, yeah, I mean,
This committee can agree to that and we can report it to the board.
100%.
because if you use June to June, it creates problems.
Yes.
It creates administrative problems for each of the counties as well as the city.
That's exactly.
Use the short system one time and then use annual.
All right, so, all in favor of that, is that a motion?
Absolutely.
Anybody opposed? All right, so that's passed in this committee. I guess,
Who don't want to put down for the motion?
who wants to make the motion?
I'll make it.
All right, second? Sure. Okay, and, so what that is we're gonna, it'd be moved and seconded, and that's where we're gonna go in our process. Thank you. Yeah, good, yeah. Great, that's healthy.
Well, it's a good move for everybody.
Yeah, it is. All right, anything else, John?
That's all you got, isn't it?
All I had.
All right, any other business for today? Anybody have any questions they wanna, you all got the money all figured out?
We kind of talked a little before you got here, but we do have to make a decision at some point in the near future what we're doing about zero fares, at least for next year, and we need to do it in a relatively timely manner, just because we promised we would in case we come back in. Other
Is
than
that for the next finance committee to start
I
talking
think
about?
it's gonna come up through your development committee.
Oh.
So I want to get with her, and I know they're doing a study, or do you want to go to finance?
Yeah, I didn't go to either committee, whatever.
I think you gotta talk about it in both places, right? We gotta talk about
Yeah.
the impact on
Um,
services, the development, and here through finances and get to consensus.
But we do have a consultant that will be hoping kicking off soon to do a study for basically the baseline, an alternative that we still consider low income, like capping and then zero fares. So we have the background information to go with it. So that won't be.
how much is the consultants, are we already paid for that study? Or committed to that study? I don't know if we
Who
need to
pays
pay a
for it?
consultant. to do that.
How we read,
Oh, it's code. I guess.
But there are,
At least we
the thing
can
about
use
this
it to
thing
back up the
is
decision.
the combination of,
Then
of
that's fine.
issues
I
of
just need to get
ridership.
the numbers that we need to spend.
as we looked at issues of ridership and state revenue regarding to ridership, and also the whole cost figure of trying to do fare capping or one of these complicated things reduces your net. So, we're already just netting, what, 3.5 out of 5.3. If we do fare capping, that's a much more costly process. We probably net, we'll find out, but something less than 3.5. So we need.
But we
to-
don't net that if we get something that says that, but if you do this, you're a ridership person,
Yeah,
you'll
we-
see a drop in ridership of X amount, which would then
Right.
hit you on the other side. I mean, that's the part that, if that wasn't the case, then it would make sense no matter what, to put fares back in. But when it does change your formulas, because that, no matter, if you put 10 cents in, it's gonna change the ridership by some number.
What
Even
kind
if
of-
it's only 10 cents a
Yeah,
trip,
right.
than it is for free. So if you don't use the fact that your funding formulas change, even if it was one more dollar to the organization, even if it's $1 million, it's $1 an hour to the employees, right? But if you're gonna lose it off the federal and state funding,
And you have-
when you pick it up, you're doing nothing and you're just doing extra work to hurt, on the organization. That's why I think that you have to have that totality of understanding, or it doesn't make sense.
Adrian, how fast do you think we could get responses to the consultant work on the zero fare?
it's supposed to be closed out by November 2nd.
So you mean, that's just when we left the contract,
No, the report sheet.
the report, so would you guys, when would you like to,
Well, I guess we probably.
when do you want to take up your conversation in the finance committee on zero fare? Do you want to start next
If we
month?
do it in October, when we're in the transition with people, it probably doesn't make sense. We won't have the reports on November, so we probably ought to do it in November, but we're gonna have to make a decision quickly.
So November meeting, John, Adrian, we'll have a really serious time to look at the zero fare thing in the finance committee, right?
Yep.
We promised ourselves we'd do that.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I bring it up,
I
because
know.
I remember we made the commitment the board made a commitment to itself to do that.
Any further business today? All right, meeting is ended. Thank you all.
Because I can assure you, zero fares drive me crazy, but if I look at the totality.
We got here, we decided to continue to forego the chair.
Yeah, so my son got on the cable one
We
day.
nominated Todd Weaver to the nominating committee.
Downtown,
So we're John Weaver's gonna be on the nominating committee, we're nominating GRTC chair. Ridership. So he'll nominate just so you guys. Clear transparency, Todd is gonna be our nominee for an officer position. Works out.
The bus stop.
It's just that thing from Sam was good. Formula they use, about a ton.
I mean, John.
Ridership is up before others are coming back up, so it's helping us with the formula they're expecting.